And because the police began to disrespect their civil rights and their citizen rights and their natural rights, they rose up in rebellion against the police. So if the United States of America can be born of a rebellion against police terrorism, why in the hell can't black freedom be born from a revolt against police terrorism? We have to stop letting people control the public narrative as it relates to what black people can and what black people cannot do to bring change. Need I remind you that the most successful, disruptive protest that caused disorder in America was the Civil Rights Movement, where they deliberately broke the laws, deliberately went against the policies of the city, boycotted the buses even though the city declared it to be illegal. Dr. King, one of the leaders, went to jail more than 250 times. The Civil Rights Bill and the Voting Rights Act, and we know there's limitations to them both. But the bottom line is those acts and what little progress came from those acts was not born from a political protest. It was born from grassroots street protests. And this is important for you to understand because the black bourgeoisie of Cincinnati, the black bourgeoisie of Cincinnati, the coon Illuminati of Cincinnati, Ohio, would have you think the way you change things in Cincinnati is by registering to vote. Now, I don't know if you've been paying attention, but ever since Dr. King was assassinated by the FBI on April the 4th, 1968, for the past nearly 50 years, every time we have a problem, the bourgeoisie gives us the same solution for every problem. Just register and vote. Do you really think voting would have saved Trayvon Martin? Do you really think voting would have saved Michael Brown? Would it have made a difference for Freddie Gray or Eric Garner? Hell no. Voting does not change things. Voting simply legitimizes the agenda that the street protest was born from in the first place. So what I'm saying, unless black people break some rules, you will get no laws that benefit you. In other words, in order to create a new social order, you must be willing to create disorder.
Yeah.
Disorder gives rise to order.
Yeah.
The Boston Massacre gave rise to the United States of America. The disorder of the 60s gave rise to the Civil Rights Bill and the Voting Rights Act. So don't tell me that taking it to the streets don't make a difference because if you're black. Everything we've ever gotten in America came from the fact that we took it to the street. You can't give me one law. You can't give me one bill. You can't give me one act. You can't give me one executive order that ever was issued from this country that did not come from black people shedding blood, shedding their jobs, shedding their livelihood, shedding their safety, shedding their security. If we want change, you must be willing, some of us, to die for that change. And in fact, more of us would have to be willing to die than at any time before because we have allowed white folk to get so spoiled and arrogant with their mistreatment of black folks. Yes, we have. See, for a while, racism went underground. And they used the psychological technique. They used the economic technique. They used the political technique. The overt racism went underground. When the white folk wake up in the 21st century and say, wait a minute now, we ain't got no more Medgar Evers. We ain't got no more Dr. King. We don't have no more Al Hodge, Malik El Shabazz. There's no more Marcus Garvey. I don't see Ida B. Wells on the horizon. They said, why are we hiding who we are? We had to do that in the 60s because black folks would get bucked with us on the streets. But if you notice now, black folk have gotten so in love with our iPods and iPads. They've gotten so in love with the fact that they can get a car note with even barely a job to pay it. They've gotten so in love with the pocketbooks and the sneakers. Black men have gotten so in love with white females. Before I get to that,
you go both ways.
The biggest difference.
You go both ways.
The biggest difference between the African in America before 65 and the African in America after 65 is that the African in America before 65 knew that he was a victim of white supremacy. The African in America after 65, you think white supremacy disappeared. And part of that hustle was the selection of President Obama. He was part of the psychological technique to put Negroes to sleep for 8 years so that white supremacy could rearm, restock, re-prepare, and re-strategize. So by the time Obama was out of office, it will look like he was back in slavery. That's right. Falling in love with elected officials. I thought we'd been there and done that with Bill Clinton. Falling in love with elected officials. I thought we'd been there and done that with Jimmy Carter. Falling in love with elected officials. I thought we'd been there and done that with over 500 black elected officials since the Civil Rights Act. And unfortunately, most of the time when a black is elected to office, the condition of blacks gets worse. And do you know why? I need you to understand why. And it's not simply that the politician is dishonest and disloyal. The biggest reason why black elected officials often lead to a demise of the condition in black people is because the average black elected official is hired, elected on white money. If I'm running for mayor in Cincinnati, I'm running for state rep in Cincinnati, I'm running for city council in Cincinnati, 99% of the time I'm a Democrat. And if I'm not a Democrat, I'm a Republican. Or I belong to the Libertarian Party. No matter what party I belong to, it's controlled by white folks. And so when I run for office, it is these good white folks that finance my campaign. So even though I love black Cincinnati because it was good white folks that financed my campaign, guess whose agenda I carry out when I get elected? Not the agenda of the black community, but the agenda of the good white folks who put me in office. So rather than rebuking the black elected official, I'm going to rebuke y'all. Because you should know by now that in order to keep a black elected official honest, you have to raise the money necessary for them to win the election so they don't have to kiss nobody's ass in order to carry out a black agenda. It is your fault. $1 trillion economy and almost no infrastructure. What is this year, brothers and sisters? 1865 is the sesquicentennial of the 13th Amendment. This December 6, 1865 will be 150 years since December 6th of 1865 to 2015. 150 years since the chains came off. And let me ask you a question. As you sit here, 150 years since the end of the Civil War, what have you done for yourself lately? A century and a half since Douglas and Harriet. A century and a half since Martin Delany and Alexander Cromwell and Sojourner Truth. Here you are,